to the home of fear.
Okay, this is going way too far.
Lights on, no toying around. And let the fun
Hello and welcome to today's video, and today I'm going to be counting down the top 10 Halloween scare mazes that I have experienced so far. Now, since the last version of this video I made, which was just the top 5 scare mazes back in 2022, I have experienced 5 brand new scare mazes within this year, so that number has basically doubled. I'm going to be ranking them all in today's list. Now, without further delay, let's just get on starting with number 10. So at number 10 we have the Attic Terror of the Towers at Alton Towers Scarefest. Now, this maze was originally introduced in 2019 and is actually located within the Towers ruins themselves. Now, that is one of the unique things about this maze that sets it apart from the other mazes that are usually built in like either brand new purpose-built buildings or just buildings of previous attractions. This one is built physically in the Towers ruins themselves, and there's actually sort of loosely based on a story that the park made that is based around the towers themselves. Now, it is a pretty good maze, very creepy in there, lots of really good theming, but I think the only thing about it that I personally wasn't like a huge fan of was the fact that there were not a lot of actors in the time that I went in there. Now, I've only done it once, and the one time that I did do it, there were only about maybe 5 actors in there, in the whole maze. Now, I'm not sure if that's just a personal experience, because it can vary in things like this. There could either be like just 5 actors, or the entire acting crew could just be in there all at once. It really depends. But for me, it was a decent little maze, but personally it's my least favourite out of the ones I've done so far. But yeah, that was the Attic Terror of the Towers at Alton Towers Scarefest. So at number 9 we have Platform 15 End of the Line at Thorpe Park Fright Nights. Now, this is actually a defunct scare maze that operated at Fright Nights at Thorpe Park in Surrey from 2016 until 2021, and I experienced it in its final season of operation. And what's different about this maze compared to all the other ones on this list is that it's a fully outdoor scare maze. So all the other mazes are located within enclosed buildings, whereas this one is located outdoors. Personally, it was actually a pretty good experience. This was the first scare maze I ever did. And I actually really enjoyed it. Obviously, as I've gone on and I've done all these other scare mazes, I've enjoyed the others more. I think maybe if this was like an indoor scare maze, it would probably be higher on my list. I think it's the fact that it's outdoors, it makes it less immersive, and also it feels like when you're walking down like the pathways for it, it feels a lot more open and less claustrophobic than so many other mazes, which means that the scare factor just isn't as there as some of the other mazes. Like, the actors in there actually did a fantastic job, and the storyline is really cool. But yeah, Platform 15 End of the Line, decent little maze. I just wish that the pathways for like the outdoor parts of the whole maze were more compact, so that the scares were a lot more like scaled up, if you know what I mean. So at number 8 we have Darkest Depths at Alton Towers Scarefest. Now, Darkest Depths was first introduced also in 2019 alongside the Attic, but what differed with this maze originally, it was a family scare maze in its first season when it was located actually in Mutiny Bay, which fit with the theme more, considering this maze is themed around pirates, and sort of like ghost stories revolving around pirates and buried treasure and whatnot. But after 2019 it got moved to literally right next to the Towers ruins themselves, and it became a slightly more intense experience. Now, I did the maze back in 2022, and it was actually a really good maze. What stood out for me most was the incredible theming in there. Like, honestly, this maze is built up out of shipping containers. Literally, when you go in there, you cannot tell that you're just in metal boxes. Honestly, it's so immersive. It actually feels like you're going on a journey through like a haunted pirate ship. And honestly, it's like some of the costumes the actors wore as well, especially with like the Kraken at the end of the maze. Yeah, honestly, theming wise, that's probably the best part of Darkest Depths. Scares were pretty good. Obviously, there weren't much like unique to rave about, but I think the main highlight for me for Darkest Depths was the theming. So yeah, Now this is another defunct maze, much like Platform 15. Its last season of operation was 2023. But yeah, it was a decent little maze, and I thought it was really good. So now at number 7 we have Altonville Mine Tours at Alton Towers Scarefest. Now this maze has been operating since 2016, so 9 seasons. It returns even this year as well. So it was originally just known as Altonville Mine Tours, but in 2023 they renamed it to Altonville Mine Tours Tiny's Revenge. And in that version of the maze it was hardly any different to the original version, so I'm just going to label it as Altonville Mine Tours, just for easier purposes. But honestly, this maze, when I did it in 2022 and 23, because I did it twice in a row because I thought the Tiny's Revenge rename was going to be making the maze significantly different. But both times I did it, it was actually a really good maze. It was the best maze at Alton Towers that I did, up until recently. So in terms of like what they had, so like I said, it's located basically sort of just underneath the tower's ruins. It's kind of weird where it's located. Now, as per usual with these mazes at towers, the theming in there is phenomenal. Like the scares you get are actually brilliant. The storyline is really cool, and honestly, like this maze, it's only been operating for about 9 years, but it looks like it's been there for absolutely ages, mainly because the theming is just so good. It's meant to be like an abandoned like gold mine with the skin snatchers who basically lured you into the gold mine to basically just take your skin away from you. It's actually pretty cool. It's probably one of the more intense mazes that the towers line up, and overall, really good scare maze, one of the best that Alton Towers have had. So at number 6 we have Deadbeat, located at Thorpe Park Fright Nights. Now this is actually a brand new for 2024 scare maze, and it is located within the former Black Mirror Labyrinth building. Now that building is great for scare mazes, mainly because of its history in Fright Nights, because the building that is located in has been used for scare mazes before. Cabin in the Woods, Walking Dead Living Nightmare, Walking Dead Do or Die, just to name a few. And a couple of years ago it was made into Black Mirror Labyrinth, which isn't a scare maze, but was like a walk-through mirror maze. It was basically just a glorified mirror maze. It was alright, but it weren't that great. But Thorpe Park announced last year that it was not going to be returning this year, and so they've brought it back into a brand new scare maze for this year's Fright Nights. Now they have in terms of like what they've actually done with the Black Mirror Labyrinth building, they have completely transformed it. Now honestly, you literally, when I went in there earlier this year, it was completely unrecognisable. Like, you would not think that what they did with it was just some mirrors and flat strobe lights, and literally that was it. Like, they turned it into like a full-on themed environment. Like, it honestly, you really just feel like you're in some kind of like haunted, like sort of cursed nightclub type place. The storyline is very unique as well. I don't think I've ever seen like a scare maze themed around this, at least not at like a theme park Halloween event anyway. But I think what maybe makes this placed at number 6 and not higher is because like the actor interaction with the guest is very, very brief. Like, usually when you go past an actor, they'll probably jump out at you, and then that's pretty much it, and until you encounter the next actor. So maybe if the actor interactions were a little bit better, more drawn out, then this maze will probably be higher on my list. But overall, Deadbeat is a pretty good maze, and one that I would recommend if you're wanting to experience at next year's Fright Nights if it returns. So we're now in the top 5, and at number 5 we have Creepy Caves Resurgence, located at Chessington World of Adventures Halloween. Now this is yet another maze that is no longer in operation. Its last season of operation was in 2022, and the one I did was in its penultimate year of operation in 2021, when it was known as Creepy Caves Resurgence. Because this maze has had a number of names throughout the years and storylines, but ultimately the Creepy Caves like brand and theme has remained. And when I did this was the second scare maze I've ever did, and out of the 2 I did on that trip, it was the best. Mainly because it was, I think it was the first indoor scare maze I did, and it was actually really intense. Like, honestly, the actors do such an incredible job in there. The intensity of the scares that you get is actually surprisingly like intense, considering Chessington's supposed to be a family theme park, and Halloween is meant to be like a sort of family friendly event. So the fact that they had this sort of like intense scare maze was pretty insane. And the theming in there, like I said, was phenomenal. Like, it honestly feels like you're going through some sort of like strange, like, scientific cave place. It's hard to describe. But yeah, honestly, the experience in there, it was just madness from start to finish. And I honestly loved it so much. And I'm sad that it's gone, but I'm glad that I did it when I did. So at number 4 we have Trailers at Thorpe Park Fright Nights. Now this is one of the 5 scare mazes that I experienced for the first time this year, along with Deadbeat. And honestly, this maze, I love it so much, this maze. Like, the whole storyline of it, it's a nice callback to all the previous scare mazes that have existed throughout the past 2 decades at Fright Nights. And the execution of each scene in the maze is handled so well. Like, if you don't know the story of Trailers, it's basically based on a cinema that literally brings the films that it's showing to life. And obviously, if you know like the history of like Fright Nights and whatnot, each film that you actually go through in the maze is based on a previous scare maze that has operated at Fright Nights. And that is just so cool. It was introduced in 2021 for the 20th anniversary, and I've been bringing it back year after year since. And it's so good. And obviously the actors, literally there's so much range in each scene. So like, you could be coming off some kind of like high intensity scary actor that's jumping out at you every second. And then there's some scenes where the actors are just like standing like very, very creepily. And it's sort of like an eerie sort of atmosphere. It's honestly so cool. Like the amount of range each scene has in like the scares. And also the theming as well. The theming is actually really incredible. I love the theming in there. And yeah, each room is so different. Like each scene, it don't feel like they're all part of the same maze. That's what I love about it. Yeah, Trailers at Thorpe Park is my number 4 maze, and now let's move on to the top 3. So now at number 3 we have Stitches, which is also at Thorpe Park Fright Nights. Now this is the brand new scare maze that was introduced last year in 2023, and it's located just adjacent to Colossus and the scare zone, the Crows of Morecambe Meadow. Now, again, I did this maze for the first time this year, and it was an incredible experience in this maze, honestly. Again, like some of the other mazes on this list, the main highlight for me was the immaculate theming. Like, honestly, the theming in there, the whole building, the whole maze is built within just a marquee tent with like a sort of wooden facade as the entrance that's meant to look like a toy shop. But when you go in there, you don't even realise you're underneath just a marquee tent. Like, the amount of detail they've put into like each and every part of this maze is incredible. And it's not like, unlike some of the other mazes where they've made the theming more of the highlight and had less focus on the scares. No. The scares, I'd say, are probably just as good as the theming. Like, it has such a creepy sort of atmosphere at the very start of it, and as you go on through the maze, which feels like it goes on for ages, that atmosphere intensifies, and it's honestly so good. Yeah, it was an excellent maze, and I honestly really love Stitches so much. So at number 2 we have Survival Games at Thorpe Park Fright Nights. Now this maze was wild, honestly it was. It's different to most other mazes I've done. It's a multi-route maze, so there's multiple paths that you can take, and you also can get split up from your group. So if you're going in like a large group, you can get split up and just end up on your own, which is mental. And also the actors' interactions with you is just crazy. Like, the level of intensity in there is unreal. Like, the experience I had, it was just madness from start to finish. Like, even at the start, when you're not actually in the main part of the maze, when you're just in like the start part where you've got to like sort of vote, because this year they've added at the start of the maze like an electric chair with a person sat in it, and you get to vote whether they get electrocuted or not. They always ends up getting electrocuted. It's such a fun maze. Theming wise, it's not got the best theming in the world. It's mainly just like sort of like concrete walls with some other like random bits of theming. But I think the actors, like the job that the actors do and the level of intensity and the atmosphere in the maze, I think make up for that. So overall, Stitches is my number 2 scare maze. Before we get to number 1, if you haven't already, then please make sure to like and subscribe. And now on to number 1. So we have now reached my number 1 scare maze, which is Compound to Alton Tower Scarefest. And now this is another brand new for 2024 scare maze that was introduced as part of this year's Alton Towers Scarefest. And this maze, honestly, it was an absolute blast in this experience. Honestly, there's so many things about it that they got like so right. Now this maze, it forms part of the Phalanx storyline, the whole Forbidden Valley theme that's been developing over these past couple of years. It serves as one of the sort of post-Nemesis Reborn editions, with the other ones being the Phalanx Expo, which was this year's fireworks, and Project Ocean, which is opening next year. This maze, honestly, it was actually really cool. Like, the theming in there, I want to point out the theming. Even though it's built in like the similar sort of building as survival games, where it's made up of shipping containers on both sides with like a large tent in the middle. It's another multi-route maze, and you do get split up from your group at the very start. But honestly, what this does better than survival games is the theming. The theming is actually phenomenal. Alton Towers always nail it with the theming. Like it feels like honestly, it's like they've been building it for many months as like a permanent attraction. Because you'd think it would with the level of theming in there. Now it's got a similar start to survival games where there's like a sort of room with cages or pods. But honestly, it's much better themed in there. If honestly, the whole maze, it just feels like you're in a sci-fi movie, like you're in like an alien movie or something. And the actors, honestly, the actors, not only did the actors deliver an incredible performance, but also some of like the actors, like the character costumes that they're wearing, like some of them, you could either come across like a Phalanx soldier, or some like Phalanx people with like tasers or whatnot, or horrific alien creatures. Like honestly, in my opinion, this maze gives pretty much everything you could want out of a scare maze. The only thing I could say they could improve on is maybe like the duration of it, because you're pretty much in there for maybe about 2 or 3 minutes and then you're out of the maze. So maybe if it comes back next year, just change, maybe make it like slightly longer. I know it's multi-route, so it could vary depending on which routes you take, because there's a lot of routes that you can actually take in there. But maybe if they made it slightly longer, then that would be a good improvement. But overall, Compound is my favourite scare maze that I've done so far, and I really do hope it returns for next year's Scarefest. So yeah, that is it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, then please much just like and subscribe, and comment what you would like to see in the next video. Goodbye.